Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people who I've connected with in the world of arts and entertainment over the years. And as we record this episode, it is the historical Canada Day, July 1st, 2021, as we mourn the loss of so many of our Indigenous First Nations children. Welcome to the show, world musician Cassius Khan.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It is my absolute pleasure. Now, I know that you are one of the recently passed Ellen McIlwaine's nearest and dearest friends, and we will talk about that later on in the show. But first of all, I want to talk about you, Cassius. I know that you are a master of combining the classical styles of Chazal and Tumri singing and Tabla, and you are a multifaceted artist, and you've been recognized and awarded in so many ways. How did you get started in the music business in the first place?
Well, music for me, I think since I was a young child, my parents had recognized that I was very different, especially when it came to the first words that came out of my mouth, and they were bowls of the tabla, really, just gibberish to them. But it was something that maybe I carried from my previous life and coming into this life. And just being more and more attracted to music. My hands would constantly keep moving. I would play the washing machine, my parents' pots, and then my dad, who enjoyed music, and with his friends, he would just kind of play around and have fun. We had a harmonium and we had a tabla, we had a dholak in our house. And so those were my toys. I would constantly go to them and I would just put my fingers on the instruments, and my parents were like, wow, this guy, even though he didn't learn, his hands are moving in unison. He's able to play. So there must be something. And my voice, too. My voice from a very young age had certain tonal intonations that would only be taught or, would only be proficient if somebody learned them from a proper guru. And so I had these intonations in my voice naturally. And it wasn't until I became a little bit older where I decided that music would be my path. It didn't go very well with my family because my parents had aspirations for me to become a lawyer or a doctor. It's the standard professions that every parent wants for their child. And I went into that direction of music. It wasn't really well accepted. So there was a lot of friction in the very beginning. And I just kind of branched out on my own and started to delve myself into my work. I had a wonderful guru that taught me, and it just things took off from there, and I started working and performing with other musicians.
Now I'm curious, where was home at this time?
So I was born in the islands of Fiji, and I came to Canada when I was 4 months old in 1974, and lived in Edmonton until 1983, where we moved back to the islands. And I lived there and schooled there for 4 years and came back when I was 13 and went back to Edmonton. So that's where I was pretty much brought up, was mostly in Edmonton. I spent most of my youth there except for the 4 years in Fiji. And so that was home for me.
I took the train when I was a young boy, circa 1970, from North Bay, Ontario, out to Vancouver to visit with relatives there. And I know there
Yeah.
were a lot of people emigrating into Canada at that time. So was there a strong Indian community in Edmonton when you were a child?
No, not really. We came in 1974. It was a very different period when we moved to Edmonton. Edmonton, at that time, very conservative province, and they weren't very open when we moved there. I remember my childhood there. It wasn't a very openly accepting city when I was young. So there wasn't a very strong Indian community. When we went back to Fiji and came back in 1987, I noticed that the community was significantly bigger than what I remembered it to be. So things were slightly different then, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier working with a guru, so I was wondering where that happened. Was that in Fiji?
Yes, so when I was in Fiji, my ear got really tuned to classical music when my father's brother-in-law, his name was Dr. Shaukat Ali Sahib, and he had introduced me to a few of these Indian classical cassettes because he could see that my voice was a certain way, and he was very knowledgeable about a lot of things. He was a PhD, he was an LLB, he had a multitude of degrees. And he introduced me because he into Indian classical music. Really, he said, "Listen to this," and I remember the song very well. And it was a song in a raga called Patdeep, and it was sung by this amazing musician. And it was like, "Diya nahi aaye." And I listened to that, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, like what is this?" And it completely caught my ear. So when I heard that song, I was like, "Oh my God, what is this? This is amazing." And I kept listening to the cassettes that my uncle had given me. And that's when I decided that, yes, I will be a musician, but if I am to be a musician, this is the type of music that I want to perform. And from there, a great maestro of tabla had come from India to Fiji at that time. So my uncle introduced me to him, and I started learning a little bit about the tabla through him. And when we came back to Canada, my father's close friend, his name is Rukhsar Ali, and he learned tabla in India from one of the greatest tabla maestros. His name was Ustad, meaning master, Latif Ahmed Khan of the Delhi Gharana, or the Delhi School of Tabla playing. And so my father had introduced me to him. I was initiated into tabla playing. His sister, Mushtari Begum, was very keen to teach me vocal because she saw that I had potential for singing. And she herself was an amazing vocalist. And so she said, "Beta, son, sing something for me." And so they passed me the harmonium. And I said, "No, I'll play the tabla and sing." So they were pretty quiet. So I started singing and playing at the same time. And after I was done, I looked at them and they just had this bewildered look. So I wasn't sure. I thought maybe I did a bad job and they didn't like it. And that's when they said, "No, Cass, we've never seen anyone in our lives who can play the tabla and sing at the same time. And so we're going to teach you." She goes, "I'm going to teach you vocal, and this is how you're going to present it." And then for the next 27 years of my life, I was in strict training regimen on both vocal and tabla. And so my journey began. And they lived here in Vancouver, and I was in Edmonton. So I would fly in from Edmonton every year during the summer break. And my training would commence at those days. It was between 16 to 18 hours a day. Every single day, I would be training, practicing, and learning. And I completely immersed myself into my music, into my practice, into becoming better, into honing my skills, and being patient and being frustrated, but not allowing it to overtake my mind. It was a period of conditioning and trying to perfect myself. So, and I'm still working on it as much as I can today. It's a lifetime of learning, right?
Dedication is what that is. And I'll tell you, I am sure glad that in my case I chose the guitar and blue-eyed soul singing because I was already I was already performing in half the time that you were just practicing. So that's
Right.
quite the dedication, sir. Now, I know that over the years you have not just been limited to one style. You've been involved in collaborating with pop artists, rock, rap, Asian, African, blues.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's good on you. And I know you've
Thank
been nominated for and won many awards for your talent. I want to talk a little bit about your friendship with our mutual friend, the late Ellen McIlwaine.
you. Oh, yes. Yeah.
She's had a vast network of friends over the years. She hung out with Jimi Hendrix, had Jack Bruce in her band, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
Now, how did you two connect?
So my relationship with Ellen McIlwaine goes back to when I was 7 years old, and I'll tell you how that was. My father had a number of vinyl records, and he would just go and buy stuff, and people would lend him stuff, so he liked to listen to music on his record player. And one of the songs that he was playing was called "We the People" by Ellen McIlwaine. And I heard that song and I asked my dad to please play it again. Can you rewind it? So he, set the needle back on the record and I listened to it again and I listened to it again. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, if this song only had tabla. And that's how it began. And 20 years later, I get a phone call from this beautiful, sultry voice. The phone rings, I pick up the phone and I said, hello. And she goes, hello, is this Cassius Khan? May I speak to Cassius Khan? And I said, yes. Speaking, may I ask who's calling? And she goes, Cassius, I'm Ellen McIlwaine, and I'd like to do a gig with you. And I was wondering if you're available. And I was like, hold on a minute. I'm like, are you the Ellen McIlwaine who sang We the People? And she's like, yes, I'm Ellen McIlwaine. And I was completely floored. I'm like, wait a minute. so you're Ellen McIlwaine and you're calling me to ask me to come and play tabla with you in a gig. And that time I was in Edmonton and she was in Calgary. She was living in Calgary. So Amika, who was then my girlfriend, she's my wife now, the two of us drove down from Edmonton to Calgary. And we went to this gig where Ellen and I met for the very first time. And here I am standing in front of this beautiful goddess of music. And I was so humbled to be in her presence. And she said, "Oh, yeah, let's just play." And that's exactly how she said it. And that's how I like it too. I don't like to rehearse with people. It's better for me to just sit with you and just let's see what we can do. And that's where the best music comes out. Turns out that it was so amazing. Her voice, her guitar, and my tabla, and my voice, everything went so well together. It was so synchronized. It is as if the two of us have been playing together for many lifetimes, and it was magical on stage at that moment. And the audience showed their appreciation with a standing ovation at the end of the night. And that's where Ellen and I knew that this relationship is going to go far beyond just this one gig. And she was such a loving and nurturing person. And, it just, her personality, my personality, everything just went well. So that's how it began for us.
Wow. 7 years old to 27, and then the connection happens. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was something. It was what a surreal moment for me to even be in that situation, right? And who would have ever thought that would ever happen? It's like a fairy tale storybook. You know what I mean?
It really is. And I know that she adored you. When I interviewed Ellen some time ago,
Yes.
she echoed the fact that you are the only person that she's ever even heard of who could not only play the tabla but sing at the same time. And I'm not very educated as to your particular Indian style of music, but apparently you are a one of a kind, and she knew that.
Yeah, she really was very musically ahead of her time, and I was quite shocked that she had so much admiration, so much knowledge about world music. I mean, world music meaning Robert Brown's version of what he thinks that all the other musical cultures of the world should be world music, but you can have many different genres of rock and roll and pop. But she was very, very ahead of her time, and she really recognized that what I was doing was something that I didn't expect her to recognize. It just spoke of the greatness that she had in her intuition about all forms of music. Yeah.
Yeah, well, from what I understand, when she was a child, she was surrounded by a multitude of multicultural music, and so
Yeah.
it was a natural for her to go down the path that she did and to recognize others of greatness in multi-ethnic styles.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. She had like I said, just a vast amount of knowledge. And her going to the Japanese school, the international school in Canada with all different kinds of cultures and, all different kinds of people, it really was different for me to see a person who was of European descent, a person who was so knowledgeable about other forms of music. And she's like, "Have you heard of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan?" I'm like, "Of course I have." And then she introduced me to like Egyptian musicians. And through her, I knew of a musician, got to hear Kulthum, one of the greatest Arabian classical vocalists in Egyptian music. And she introduced me to that. And I didn't even know about that. So she really helped me tune my ear into other forms of world music. I also helped her tune her ear more into Indian classical music. She helped me tune my ear into R&B. And she was a vast vessel of knowledge and information and just everything, a completely perfect package.
Absolutely, and when I think about all the recording, all the record deals, and all the money that somebody made, the guys
Yeah.
in suits made a lot of money off of her talent. And,
Yes.
a lot of people would just be in a state of depression having to live in an apartment in
Yeah.
retirement after that long and illustrious career and to drive a school
Yeah.
bus. But, she loved the children and she
Yeah.
loved her job. She loved everyone. She was so kind and passionate and eloquent and polite. And, I released the interview with her and she asked my permission to share it on her page. And I thought, well, who does that? That's just a
Yeah. Yeah.
really special person. But I know you had some awesome adventures together. And recently I saw something on social media where you talked about the two of you working together at various festivals where it was a challenge for the both of you from on her end from a misogynistic standpoint, and you had some racist
Yeah.
cultural issues to deal with. So what can you tell us about some of the adventures that you had together?
Well, we had a lot of fun adventures together. That's without a doubt. The laughter, the jokes, sometimes laughing till tears came out of our eyes on certain situations, but yes, we also faced a lot of uphill battles too. When we worked on our album Mystic Bridge and when Mystic Bridge was nominated for a Juno, I mean, that was a great moment for Ellen and I, that this collaboration that we had done together. It was, one of the nominated albums we performed at Juno Fest. We honestly thought that things would change too for us. We would get more gigs. When we were in festivals, there were a number of incidences that do stand out. There were a number of them because I really got to see close hand how women are treated in the music business. And some of the things that she had to put up with were just, it's like, oh my goodness. Like she had a lot of patience, and I could see why she would run out of patience. I mean, she was reaching an age where she was also menopausal, and sometimes a sound engineer would just say something that wasn't nice to say. For example, if she's like, "I'd like more my guitar in the mix," or "I'd like my voice to be like this," and they would tell her, "Oh, I think I know what you sound like. I'm a sound engineer. I know." I mean, we always run into those types of people, those types of sound engineers who really don't know what they're talking about, but they pretend that they do. And next thing you know, there's friction. The friction will start and it will escalate. And the thing is, there were times where, I would just have to stand up and say, listen, to the sound engineer, I'm like, you're talking to a legend. She knows her voice better than you do. Your job is to give her what she wants. So my suggestion is that you do your job. And of course, what happens is that people start to label us as difficult. Oh, they're difficult to deal with. And it's not the fact that Ellen or I were difficult. It's just that, I mean, if you want to push or shove, I mean, we will stand up for ourselves. It's not like we should be quiet and just be meek. And that's basically, some of the issues started right from the sound engineers or a few other things here or there. I mean, when I was performing with her, I would receive some derogatory comments from audience members, had things thrown at me on stage from the audience, especially after the 9/11 incident. People would say mean things like, oh, this is Al Qaeda blues music, or, what the hell is this, and blah, blah, blah. And then my last name being Khan, people would throw a beer can or something at me while I'm playing. So we've faced a lot of things, in our performances. The fact that she was a woman and the fact that I was a person of color, and we had a sound, which I don't think some people, and especially these festivals, it just seemed like they weren't ready for that kind of sound. And so, yeah, we faced our difficulties there. And at the same time, when we performed for the audience, the majority of the audience, of course, would speak for itself. Ellen was a goddess on the slide guitar. We've had a number of amazing performances where, we would look at each other. It's like, oh yeah, that was great. The way that she was able to, just mesmerize the audience. And with my tabla, it was a different sound. And when the audience would get up to clap, I would stand on the side of my riser. I would clap for her too. And sometimes I would walk into the audience and clap for her. And then she would say, "No, Cass, they're clapping for you too. I wouldn't be here without you. Come on." And she was so gracious. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's the other way around. I wouldn't be here in front of this audience if it wasn't for you. You're the one that gave me this platform. And she was very different in that sense. And so, yeah, a lot of fun moments we've had, especially on the road. Sometimes people would cut her off and we'd have this deep conversation about life and about music. And next thing you know, somebody would cut her off and she would just she would just get so pissed off on the road. What the hell, And it's like, what happened? This person cut me off or something. And so we'd have those funny moments. Sometimes, on the road, we would stop off at a diner and we meet some really quirky people. Sometimes raise eyebrows. It's like, oh, is that your mammy? Or it's like, what? What are you talking about? So we'd have laughs about that on the road. And we were just, it was like this funny couple on the road. We would walk into these, on the side of the road, they'd have these like fruit stalls or bakeries or whatever, and or antique shops. And we would always stop and we would go into an antique shop, take a look around. Even when we flew together, we sat together, we would just be laughing the whole flight, just telling funny jokes. And, she was a very humorous, very, very humorous person and had a wonderful sense of humor. We'd laugh a lot. We'd sometimes, we would share the headphones and watch a movie. Then we start crying together in the movies, when we would watch something on the plane or just stuff like that, right? There was a lot of awesome moments that we had. But yeah, we've had a lot of uphill battles too.
Yeah. Yeah, but through it all, you've certainly asserted your own legacy as an international musician. I mean, the Edmonton Journal dubbed you Canada's multifaceted musician. You've won global awards, been nominated very many times. Recently, you were invited to perform for the UN, the Permanent India Mission, etc. So, you can give yourself a few pats on the back as well.
Well, that's all. I think it's just it's the goddess of music that has been really kind to me. That's how I'd like to look at it. I'm just grateful to have had those opportunities, and it's just humbling for me to be able to have had those kinds of experiences in my life, right? So,
Absolutely. You mentioned Ellen's sense of humor, and last year I did a Christmas special where I invited several of my former guests on to wish people Merry Christmas. And Ellen came up with the line, "Now remember, no kissing under the mistletoe without a mask." And I
right.
and I thought that was hilarious. But you know what? She called me back about a half an hour later and she said, I don't know, is that pushing it? And I said, "No, Helen, that was really hilarious, and everybody's going to love it." And you know, every time I listen to that, I laugh. Really, I
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
You know, so
She was teaching the Southern twang. So she's like, Cass, so she was watching something on the television, the United States. There was some kind of a political issue where they wanted Spanish to be one of the official languages in the United States. And she was telling me, well, then this lady comes on from the South. And so she taught me how to say the dialogue. And the dialogue was, she said, and what does this lady say on the TV? She goes, the Bible was written in English. So if it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for them people. And I could stop laughing. And she's like, and so we sat in our car while we were driving to our next gig. And, literally the next 5 hours, she was teaching me how to say the Bible was written in English. So it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for them people. And so that was hilarious. Like we laughed every single time. I'm like, she's like, no, Cassie got the accent wrong. And we start laughing again, right? And then we started to say it in a whole bunch of different accents. And that was even more funny. So, that was an epic car ride. And we would just kill time by just talking about stupid things and having a laugh. And then at the same time, talking about very deep issues. And she would talk to me a lot about especially how the music industry had treated her. So that was another conversation that we always had. And then the other conversations being, hey, Cass, we face quite a bit of stuff too, in these festivals and some certain people, which I won't name. So we had many different deep conversations, in our years together on the road, in the air, and performing and everything.
yeah. Well, it's been great reminiscing with you about Ellen and your time together. I don't really have any more questions for you, Cassius, but I would like to give you the last word. So if there's anything that you particularly feel passionate about, why don't you tell us what that is?
Well, and I remember Ellen and I were talking about this. We had a conversation one time just about music. And my guru had actually brought this up with me when I was a young kid and asked me, Cassius, is music an art or is music not an art? And I said, okay, I said, music is an art. So my Guruji said, okay, well, think about it and answer me in 4 or 5 days. While you're practicing, try to think about what I just said. Is music an art or is music not an art? And after 4 or 5 days, my Guruji asked me again, Cass, what's your answer? I said, I think music is an art. And she says, well, do you want to know what I think? And I said, please tell me, enlighten me. And so she said, music is not an art. So I asked her why. And she said, well, because music, she goes, art is understood by human beings because art, whether it's a painting, whether it's a sculpture, whether it's the fine lines of a classic car, it could be anything that is made in that sense is really understood by human beings. But music has a profound effect on plant and animal life as well. And when it rains, the peacock dances. And the Pakhavach drum from India is played, the elephant dances. When the snake charmer plays his bean, the snake will dance to the vibrations. The nightingale sings for us. The rustling wind in the leaves of the tree or the babbling brooks of water, it's all music. And that's why music is divinity. Music is not an art. And I remember telling that to Ellen on one of our car rides. And even she was like, oh, Cass, you taught me something new. And that was the coolest thing, is that to such a wise goddess of music, who I considered a goddess of music and still consider, she was always open to learning. Ellen was always open to learning new things. And when I shared this with her, what my Guruji said, I'll never forget, her eyes turned really wide while we were on the road. And she's like, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Then she said to me, she goes, Cass, after what you said, I really look at music in a different light now too. So that was a wonderful moment shared between the two of us. And wherever you are, Ellen, I love you always and forever. I mean, that's what I have.
Beautiful. Yes, sir. Ellen will always remain with us, and I thank you, kind sir, for taking the time out of your day to speak with me today. I agree, music is magic, music is the doctor, and until such a time as guys like you and I can get together face to face.
Absolutely. We'll play together.
I would love to do that, and I would love for you and your lovely wife to get together with me and my lovely wife sometime. Until next time, cheers.
Absolutely. Cheers, my brother.
Well, I am certainly feeling enlightened after that conversation, and if you would like to know more about Cassius Khan, just check him out at cassiuskhan.com. Now, from their Juno-nominated album, Mystic Bridge, here is Cassius and Ellen McIlwaine with May This Be Love. Enjoy.
Waterfall, nothing can harm me at all. My worries seem so very small. With my waterfall, I can see my rainbow and it's calling me through the misty breeze of my waterfall. They say daydreaming is for all the lady-minded fools, yeah. Nothing else to do. So let them laugh. Go ahead and let them laugh at me, yeah. So just as long as I have it, see me through. I got nothing to lose. Waterfall, don't ever change your ways. Fall with me for $1 million. long as I have. See me through, I got nothing to lose. Long as
Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including producing, editing, guest acquisition, etc. All rights reserved. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends was written and recorded by Tommy Solo with a little help from my friends in the night crew. And hey, if you like the show, why not subscribe? Until next time, cheers.